Sindhu Srivastava is one of those amazing American dream story. She is born in India, studied engineering, came to the US, had an MBA from Wharton, worked in large corporation, and then started her own business. And recently, she bought another business in the meetings and event industry. And you're going to hear how she did that. Fascinating story. Enjoy my conversation with Sindhu. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And today, I am thrilled to be speaking with a true entrepreneur, a brain, and you see how many diploma degrees she's had, an acquisition entrepreneur who just bought a company in our industry. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Sindhu Srivastava. She is the owner and CEO of Meaningful Data and of We Crush Events. But before anything else, she is an amazing and inspiring person. Sindhu, thank you so much with everything you're doing for taking the time to speak with me today.
Eric, thank you so much for having me. It is my pleasure. As an Indian woman, understanding that there are hundreds and millions of other Indian women out there, I do my best to speak publicly just so that I can share my story, because I feel like if I could do it, there are at least a million other women who can do it. And yeah, really hoping to pave the way for them all. So yeah, thank you.
And by the way, it's not only Indian women to me, it's women in general and people in general. I have to tell you, the first time I spoke in public, I'll never forget, I was so scared that my lips was glued to my mouth for an hour. So having somebody like you is very inspiring. So as you say, you're an Indian woman. So what is your journey?
Yeah, so I'll start from the beginning. I was born in a small town in India called Nellore. Nellore is a coastal town known for its rice, known for its fish curries, and really, I think, a special place in my heart. So I was born in Nellore to a rather unique parents. My dad's Hindu and my mom's Christian. And my dad was the first one to be educated in his family. Like, forget about first one going to college, like first one educated, first person who went to school. And my dad tells the story of how somebody in his little locality found him as a 7-year-old child doing nothing in the front yard and said, hey, my son is actually having trouble going to school. Why don't you go with him as a companion? And that's how my dad started going to school at 7. And once he started attending school, he realized that it was actually pretty brilliant. And he ended up being a gold medalist in college. So it's almost like I kind of think back to my dad's story and I'm like, how many millions, if not billions of people are out there in the world who are just brilliant, and yet their brilliance hasn't reached the world, right? Like, I mean, that to me is an inspiring story. So yes, I was born to my dad, and my mom also comes from a very unique background, because my grandmother, my mom's mother, was actually a single parent raising 3 beautiful daughters in 1950s India. And you can imagine, like 1950s India, just culturally just not there, 3 beautiful daughters. And my grandmom was very pretty herself. And it's just like the dealing with the unwanted attention and also raising 3 children who became professional women. My eldest aunt is a doctor. My second aunt is a bank officer. My mom is a professor. And between the 3 of them, they did amazingly well. My mom is also a national chess champion. And anyway, I know, yeah. So my mom and my dad came together. My mom is Christian, my dad's Hindu. And in this unique union, they got married against, I guess, the wishes of the community. And when they had me, they were really afraid for me because, again, I did not have a religion. I did not have a caste. I didn't have anything. And they were really, really afraid for me. So they decided education would be my way out, right? So that's kind of my story, which is born in small town India to parents of a unique background and unique heritage who really focused on education as her ticket out into success, essentially.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. You know, a few years ago, my wife and I brought our 3 daughters to India because it's a country that I've been many times. I was organizing a lot of incentive trips. And we actually renew our vow. And the funniest thing, or the interesting thing, not funny, but the beautiful thing, is that we had the Brahman priest who couldn't speak English. And so you had the Brahman priest who was officiating. And the person who was translating was the head of the fitness, who was Muslim, and we're Jewish. So it was a very interesting moment. I'll never forget. It was in Devigar in Delaware, which was absolutely beautiful. But and I know the feeling of having the parents focusing on education, which is, you know what, it is the key, the
Yeah,
first key to anything. So you studied engineering in Madras.
that
So
is.
what was it to be a woman in studying engineering in India?
I going through the process, I don't think I fully appreciated how rare of an event just my story was, right? So I went to the set of institutions called the IITs, the Indian Institutes of Technology. And in my time, to make it into one of the IITs, you had to be like one of 150 women across all engineering aspirants in India to make it in.
Huh.
Can
Wow.
you like grasp that? Like out of the 500 million women in India, I had to be one of 150 to make it in my year. Like it's just like ridiculous. Like I mean, the odds of it are just astounding. But like really, I don't think I could have achieved any of that without my parents kind of like really pushing me.
Hmm.
And I don't agree with the method sometimes because the pushing was like, hey, you're kind of going to end up on the streets if you don't make it. But like in terms of the results, I would say that it taught me to kind of push my own boundaries and almost like jump into the unknown without kind of knowing what the other side entailed, right? So I went to IIT Madras, which is one of the original IITs. And I remember like in my batch, I think we had 26 women, which like 26 women for a batch of about 500 engineers or so. So really like a 1:20 ratio. And I don't appreciate this as much. I didn't appreciate this as much
Hmm.
back then, but it was a very unique circumstance to kind of be living that life, right? Like it was very surreal. As a young kid, you don't really like fully grasp all of that. But yeah, so that I would say it was interesting, but also taught me that I was smart, I was capable, and I pretty much could achieve anything I put my mind to. So yeah, that was pretty good.
Which, by the way, is what exactly you're doing. But from Madras to the West Coast, what happened?
Yeah, so that was interesting, right? I mean, so I think the story behind this was my dad was a bank manager and we had a pretty comfortable life, right? Like growing up, I went to an elite boarding school. Both my parents were working. But then what I didn't realize that our comfortable life kind of came at a price. So my dad had basically taken a loan for the fridge, taken a loan for the TV, these were high interest Indian loans. And before I knew it, even taken a loan to send me to this very elite boarding school that clearly my parents couldn't afford, right?
Hmm.
So I remember, and my parents were very open with me about what was going on in the background. So even going into the IIT, my dad was very clear with me that he did not have the money to send me to, say, a US university on his own money. And I kind of had to like make it on my own. And I remember asking him, I said, Dad, how much debt do you have? And he quoted like some ridiculous number. And I was like, oh my God, like, how am I going to pay all of this? And then I quickly did the math in my head, and the dollars were a little bit more economically friendly than Indian rupees. So I said, yeah, I know how I'm going to how I'm going to pay it back. I'm going to go to the US. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to earn in dollars and pay off all my dad's debts. So
Hmm.
that was kind of like my thinking. At IIT Madras, I really leaned into earning a scholarship to come to the US. I ended up getting a scholarship to go to Ohio State. And even on my scholarship money, I was the highest earning member of my family, and I would send back money home and bought my parents their first house, their first car. I mean, I don't know how many children can say, not only did I help my dad pay off all his debt, but then I also bought my dad his first home, his first car. I
Hmm.
mean, all my parents. And really, I feel like all the blessings I've had since are somehow like karma, right? Like, I mean, it's almost like
Yeah.
I did something good in the past. And not just my parents, but then I did a lot of work helping the community as well. Although like I have other stories about it, because I feel like if you give money away for free, you just create laziness in a community. So I feel like there's a
Yes.
responsible way of giving money. But I think giving back is something
I've seen that. Sorry for interrupting you, but I've seen that in my home country in Belgium.
yeah, exactly, right? So I think there's a responsible way of giving support, giving resources to people so that they're actually motivated to do even better and become the best
Hmm.
versions of themselves. And that's something that's like, I do believe that giving back is kind of like what creates more success in my life. So anyway, yeah.
That's great. I like the word you use, karma,
Yeah.
and doing good will come back to you. I
Yeah.
must say that sometimes I don't understand karma because bad people, it seems that takes a long time for some of them to get it back. But at least if you put good things, it'll come back to you.
I don't know. Like I haven't seen one mean bad person be truly happy, right? I mean, they might
Oh.
think they're happy, but then either they have kids that are struggling or they have family members in really tough circumstances. I feel like human suffering is kind of shared everywhere. And then people just might kid themselves into an unaware corner saying, oh, I'm really happy. But just wait till it unfolds, right? Like wait till the full story unfolds. And who knows? I mean, you might have
Mm.
like the worst disease that might happen to you that you've done because whatever. I mean, you just haven't played it right. So anyway,
No,
story is not fully written out.
I fully agree with you.
Yeah.
And then there is this little business school called Wharton on your
Yeah,
resume.
that is true. So yeah, that's a really neat story as well. So anyway, so I came to the US to do a graduate program at Ohio State. And I was a forced engineer, right? Like my whole calculations in my head was how do I make enough money to pay off my dad's debt and whatever. And I don't really think I ever had a passion for engineering, right? I wasn't dreaming of building distillation towers. I wasn't dreaming of heat transfer and mass transfer. Like I wasn't dreaming of those things. Rather, like I think I was dreaming of doing something useful I just didn't know what that. I said something useful, like building something, doing something that would be beneficial to many people. And I looked around. So as a graduate student at Ohio State, I looked around to see what career choices were open to me. And management consulting came up. And I was like, that's really cool because I can think clearly. I can solve puzzles. I'm pretty good at math. And if I went into management consulting, I basically got to advise companies how they could have better business operations, they could actually flourish. And that was really exciting for me. So my first job out of grad school was management consulting. That easily led to a career in analytics where I was looking at data for many companies and advising them on what programs were working, what programs were not working, where the inefficiencies in a business were. And that's kind of how I made a living, I guess. So, yeah.
Right. And so you work in large corporation for several years?
I
You
worked,
work.
yes, several years. So I had an analytics career that spanned almost 2 decades, like about 17 years or so. And also, while I was building out an analytics career, I realized that all the VPs of analytics or head of analytics, like many of them actually had an MBA. So I was like, oh, if I actually need to be the head of something, I need an MBA. So I looked around to see what the great business schools in the world were. Wharton came up and I applied. I got in. It was actually the only school I applied to when I did, just because I have a quantitative brain and I couldn't see myself going to a school that just was less quantitative in a way. So anyway, I applied to Wharton, I got in, and it really, really changed my life. So it kind of like, I think, changed my goal from being head of analytics to actually being a CEO. And today I am the CEO of 2 companies, and without Wharton, I couldn't have done it. So yeah.
That's wonderful. I'm sure that Wharton helped you, no doubt. That without Wharton, you could not have done it. Nah, that's debatable.
I mean, I might agree there, but like in my, like, I couldn't have even seen the path there, right? Like my vision kind of just ended. And I feel like going to Wharton like really opened it up for me.
I'm sure, no doubt about it. And I have friends who are studied there, so it's a beautiful and wonderful school, for sure. But then one day you said, okay, enough of working for the others.
Yes.
I'm going to work for myself and I'm going to start analyzing data to help people.
Yeah.
How did the process happen to you and how long did it take? And most importantly, especially for everybody listening, women listening, Indian women were listening, because I know it's important for you.
Yeah.
What got into your mind that you said, you know what, I believe in myself, I'm going to do it?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question. I'll start with this, right? Like I fundamentally believe as a person that if you are okay with a certain amount of bullshit, like it doesn't end with that certain amount of bullshit, right? Like, I mean, next you like become okay with a bigger amount of bullshit. And then the bullshit just becomes bigger and bigger. And then you look at your life and I'm like, okay, like what level of bullshit is not okay with me? And it becomes a really difficult question to answer. So my life as an analyst in big corporations actually had become a little bit without joy, if you may, right? So I felt like I was going into these business situations that had a lot of room for efficiency. I would lay out the data, simple things like, hey, we have a whole bunch of customers using our free products. We need to make them paid products. Let's make them paying customers. Let's actually invest in actions to recognize who they are and have a formidable plan to get them to becoming paying customers. Sounds simple. But then organizationally, I kind of would end up in situations that kind of, there was a spectrum of it. One was denial. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Your vision is too big, da, 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 da. To guarding your territory, like, oh, this is my turf. And like, how dare you do something that I'm supposed to do? And you mind your own business. And then for the next 6 months, like no results would come. So if you were like, if this is your turf and you haven't produced anything for 6 months, like, why don't you let somebody else contribute? And it just like, it was, I would say, like, long story short, like a lot of inefficiency that I was like, what am I doing? Like it felt like if I was, working at a place for 2 years, I essentially would produce results that could be done in 3 months over those 2 years, which to me was highly inefficient. I was like, here I am, a very talented resource, really struggling just because of like these organizational procedures to really like put out the results that I want to put out, right? So that was, I think, very demotivating for me working with large corporations. And the second bit of it is that all these problems become amplified when you're a woman and a woman of color. Because again, like I feel like you almost have to like prove yourself twice as much to gain the same amount of acceptance and respect as I would say colleagues who are of the majority in the US. So anyway, I mean, it just wasn't.
It's not anyway, if I may interrupt you that, because that's something that I've heard from every person of color and everyone. And that's a recurrent issue, which I think getting better over the years, but we're far from having an equal situation.
I completely agree. And I want to say this as well, right? Like, I mean, I want to say that, I'm not asking for special treatment. All I'm asking for is recognition of my capabilities for what they are without the overlay of, oh, you're too aggressive, you're like being out of your bounds, you need to lead from the back and like, whatever, like go back and sit in your corner, just very unhelpful things, which you're like, okay, if I wasn't who I am, like, would things be different for me? And would I actually be lauded for my ambition? Would I be lauded for my intelligence? Would I be lauded for the big things that I'm trying to do? And the other thing that was also happening was I'd signed up for some mentors, white men who were like, yes, we're allies for women of color. We've got your back and we're going to like go out of our way to like, make your life wonderful. Except that this one company that I was at has recorded meetings, right? So one of my so-called mentors was in a recorded meeting. And he just told me that, oh, this big project that you're doing, I support it. What a wonderful idea. You're so smart. You're so hardworking. All of this to my face. And then in this recorded meeting, he goes to this other, in a group of his own peers. And he's like, oh, I don't know what Sindhu thinks of herself. Her vision is too big. Her goals are unrealistic. Like, how will we ever get there? And like completely throwing me under the bus. And I was like, okay, like this is the reality of the world. How can I hope to achieve my potential in this environment? So again, like I said the bullshit story first, because in that situation, you have two choices, which is to be in denial and say, hey, this is not really happening. I must have misunderstood it, or something must be wrong with me that they're not able to accept me. Or you could be like, bullshit, it's all on you and who you are, because yes, you're a big fraud. You're telling me you'll support me to my face, but then you're completely throwing me under the bus as soon as I'm not in the room. Totally. How can I ever trust you? And if I can't trust somebody who's really been very vocal about being an ally to women of color, how can I trust anybody? So that really put me in a position of like, and I worked with my executive coach who just was like, Sindhu, you can't not see what it is for itself.
Of course.
And you can't do nothing. You have to do something. And with your talent, you could clearly be running an entire business by yourself. So she kind of coached me along that journey. And if there's anything anybody can learn from my experience, I would say it's this. Don't bullshit yourself, right? I mean, look at your situation for what it is and see if the truth is prevailing. If the truth is not prevailing, it's not prevailing. There are no two ways to it. Like, go do something else with your time that's going to produce better results. Like, don't be stuck. Don't complain. Don't be like, oh, I mean, hopefully like me sharing my story is not viewed as complaining, because I'm not helpless. I'm very, very capable of helping myself. I will like push myself out of there, but that doesn't mean I stop talking about what happened to me, because that's the truth. Like, that's what happened to me, and that's what the world needs to know. And it's both and, right? So anyway.
It resonated a lot with me, trust me. And I always say to my daughters, there's 3 options. You lead, you follow, you get out of the way.
Exactly.
Obviously, with this BS, that's impossible. And to your point about being too ambitious, and I always had this quote from Sheryl Sandberg on the fridge when they were younger that says, "If somebody tells you that you're bossy, tell them that you have executive leadership skills."
Exactly. Yes, I tell my kids that all the time. So, I mean, we're like four alphas in my house, and like they know that they're CEOs if they want to be CEOs. I just tell them that they're capable of being CEOs because they have that capacity and they can be if they choose to be, right?
So your executive coach opened your mind to that and coached you through that. You could have gone to another company, but you decide to. Okay.
So I spent some time actually, I was like, oh, I'll work for a big corporation because they'll have like a whole bunch of diversity initiatives and that'll help me. That didn't work out. In fact, like it was really like the politics in bigger companies are a lot more intense than in small companies. And I came to small companies and then this whole emperor's clothes and like, it just like, I actually spent some time working for a few different companies. And I realized that actually, like, it's the same repeating pattern, which is in my skin and my personality and my values. There's actually, I don't think there's a corporation in the US I can fit in. So I kind of have to create it on my own, which is why, like with We Crush Events, my goal is actually to be a Fortune 500 company that's actually run with very little bullshit so that we can employ like many other people and actually like create a whole bunch of opportunity for like where people don't need to be afraid of speaking their truth, right?
Yeah. And Sindhu, we're definitely going to talk about your company. And I think your journey is so fascinating and inspiring. Can you just also, the missing link between what you just said and where you were still working for a large corporation is your company, Meaningful Data. How did that happen?
Yeah. So my executive coach basically said, Sindhu, you know what, like in your skin, in your values, in your talent, you're too, like her words were, you're too smart, you're too authentic, you're too outspoken, and you're too ambitious to really thrive in a normal corporation in the US. You have to go create something of yourself, right? So I looked back at what my skill set was, and I'd spent 17 years being in data and analytics, and I had a unique skill set that's super rare, which is that I was a data and analytics person, which meant that I understood databases, I understood analytics, I understood data science methods from a very fundamental manner, right? Like I could talk about what Snowflake can do to organizations, to how you can actually run AI ML models on Databricks. Like I can do the whole gamut and I can actually program myself. I can program in SQL and Python. So I was like, okay, I have this unique skill set where I also have an MBA from Wharton, which means that I actually know how to administer companies like end to end. And I was like, what can I do with the two skill sets? And when I looked around, I found that in the data landscape, there were a lot of companies like Snowflake, like AWS and GCP and Azure, like all of the cloud-based things that were working on storing data, on networking data, like how do you actually transport data from one side to the other? There seemed to be another set of companies that were focused on cataloging data, on making the workflows workflows a little bit more manageable with data engineering like DBT and a few others like Nextla. And there also seemed to be a lot of like a data algorithms to say, oh, are we a data mesh or are we a data lake or like what kind of data entity are we? But in between all of this, nobody was talking about, are we looking at meaningful data? How do we actually, look at data that actually drives revenue, that optimizes budgets, that actually enables business operations to do something that's much more efficient than what they're already doing, right?
Sorry, I just want to interrupt you there because a question came to my mind. You're looking at data in a meaningful way. Got it. Do you first look at the values and the objective and the strategy of the organization before looking at their data?
Absolutely.
How you link both?
Absolutely. So actually, it's a really, really interesting process, right? You actually have to start with the business model, which is how is this business making money, right? So you say, how is it generating revenue, number one? And how is it investing its budget to make that money? Is it marketing campaigns? Is it R&D in terms of product features? Is it in a big sales force? Like, how is this company making the money it's making, right? Who are the clients that are actually paying that money? And are they acquisition? Are they renewal? What does the customer lifetime value look like? And then in terms of the budget, like what is the cost in acquiring those customers and actually maintaining those customers for the long term? So you always start there. And once you understand the business model, what you go through, it's called instrumenting the business process, right? You say, are my customers instrumented with a unified customer ID? How are my products and its product features instrumented? Do I actually know which customers are using what products and what product features? Do I know which salesperson is contacting which customers and when? Do I know who my prospects are? Do I know the marketing campaigns that are going to my? So essentially what you do is you lay out like an end-to-end process. And if you want to start, if you kind of want to take that customer-centric lens, you start with the customer and you say, okay, well, first of all, who are all my prospects that are not yet my customers? Which of them are experiencing triggers to becoming a customer? Are they aware of my brand? If they're aware of my brand, what does my competition look like? And are they also aware of my competition? How do I move into my customers, into my prospects consideration set? What other brands are they considering? And then how do I get them to try my brand? And what other brands are they also trying? And then how do I get them to buy and then to renew and actually renew for many years, which is what generates customer lifetime value, right?
Right.
You need data instrumentation along this process. And the sad truth is that many organizations, in fact, I'm willing to bet about 75% of Fortune 500 companies cannot uniquely identify who their customers are and what products they're using. Like if you went to Microsoft and said, out of all of your businesses, whether it's GitHub, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it is out of all of your businesses, tell me how many customers you have and what products they use, I'm 100% certain that they wouldn't be able to give you the right answer. Like they wouldn't know cross-functionally between LinkedIn and say Microsoft Azure what the overlap of businesses is because they're actually run as separate businesses.
And the silos and companies. Interesting.
Exactly. Yes.
One last question on that. So all the process you describe, which makes a lot of sense, it's basically measuring based on your processes. Have you an example in some instances where you actually went into the data, all the data that the company had, and actually identify prospects that they were not considering?
Oh my God, so many times. Okay. So I used to work for a company. I have so many stories. So I'll actually go on to this story because it's actually a company that went out of business. So and it's actually a repeat and rinse story for two other companies that I worked for, right? So this company essentially had a B2B business and it had multiple acquisitions that just were not coming together, right? And they just every little business unit has its own sales team going after the customers of another business unit like they were brand new customers, not even realizing that this business unit has already those customers. We already have their data. All we need is a warm introduction between the sales teams to cross-sell and upsell. No, because that's what I mean by emperor's clothes, right? Every business unit had its own head of sales who would act like the mini emperor for that little business. Too much ego to go collaborate with the next business's sales leader. And then as a data person, you see this, you call the bullshit out, and suddenly you're the brown woman who's too aggressive, who's too smart, whose vision is too big, and there's no way out, right? The analyst sees this because the data is damn clear. The data is that clear that there's a huge overlap of customers that they could actually be putting out joint contracts on and then extending the customer lifetime value, because when customers use multiple products, the banking industry has proven this. When the customers own a checking account and a credit card, their lifetime value increases like crazy. So rather than collaborating, run them as two disjointed experiences. And it's a nightmare situation. That company actually finally had to be split into parts and every part got sold into one different entity. And some of them went to PE firms, which is the worst fate a company can meet. And as an analyst, you see this and you can't do anything about it because nobody is willing to listen to you, right? So that's kind of, the short answer.
I couldn't help but smile because when I had my corporate events agency in Belgium, one of those big firms actually asked us to plan a sales meeting for them, one of the division.
Yeah.
And we arrive in some of the location we're looking at and realized that it was the third time that year that company was looking at doing a meeting there. They didn't talk with each other, which is kind of fun. So, and I'm going to link now both your companies. So you have, when did you start Meaningful Data?
I started Meaningful Data in October of last year.
October last year. And then a few weeks ago, literally a few weeks ago, you became an acquisition entrepreneur.
That's exactly right. So the biggest thing about data is that data doesn't generate itself, and data in itself is really boring until and unless you apply data to something, right? You need a story situation to apply data to, then it becomes really interesting. It's very how interesting is it if I said, Yeah, so Eric, like we use Snowflake and our processing speed like 10x. And that's not interesting, man. Okay, your processing speed 10x. Like, what life did you change? Like, there's no story behind it, right? So essentially, for data to become interesting, you almost need a muse that you can apply all your data-driven strategies to. And then it gets really fun when that muse grows like crazy, right? That's the fun bit. So I was like, okay, I'm going to consult for a whole bunch of clients, and I'm probably going to run into the same thing, right? Hey, we're not ready to make this data-driven recommendation for XYZ reasons. I can cry myself hoarse and I can be like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this. And like, it's going to take time. And I'm not a patient person. I didn't have that kind of patience. I kind of wanted my own company where I could apply all my preachings to and really grow. And then I could be like, hey, you know what? Like all those data things I was telling you, I went and did them. And by the way, this company grew like crazy. I made a bunch of money. And maybe like if you did the same thing, you can grow your companies too. And that becomes a much more powerful story.
Compelling story, yeah.
Exactly. Than, oh, I think you should do this because of X, Y, and Z. And it's really interesting. I mean, so I looked for a company whose growth opportunity was data-driven growth. Like essentially, the way that company would grow was to bring data-driven thinking to that business. So I had a few criteria like that to say, what is the company that I want to acquire and be the CEO of so that I can run it end to end and actually grow it and say, okay, see, I grew this company. So if I could have grown this company, maybe other analysts in the world who are also crying themselves hoarse, saying inefficient business operations, we need to do something. They essentially have a seat at the decision-making table because guess what? They have a really unique point of view. So
interesting. And so you're in San Francisco and you look at different businesses and boom, you're looking at the events industry. How did you come up with that?
So I had a set of criteria. So essentially, data-driven growth was one of them. I'm very familiar with B2B sales and the whole B2B operation. So I wanted a business that was kind of looking at B2B selling. The third thing I wanted it to be fun and joy. I wanted it to be super profitable. And I also wanted it to have a subscription opportunities. I wanted like some sort of a repeating criteria to the business so that we could actually have clients whose business was like repeat and we could just rely on that. So putting all of these things together, I wasn't looking for a particular industry. I was looking for any business that fit this criteria. And I actually met the sellers of We Crush events. And I was like, they were so much fun. And I was like, if these two ladies can like be this much fun and be so awesome, like it's impossible for them to build a bullshit company. So I actually spent some time with them and it's amazing. Like it's an amazing company, has many Fortune 500 companies as its clients, has an amazing business process. It's really a wonderful company. And, the interesting fact is that this company, when I first came in, they were like, Sindhu, we get like a lot of repeat business and inbound leads, but like we need other ways of lead generation. And I had experience with Zoom Info. So the first thing I did, like literally I've been there for 6 months, and within 6 months, my entire team is trained in Zoom Info. All of them are spending hours and hours every day on Zoom Info. That was the first thing I put in. And it's like steroids, right? Like, I mean, I look at like the pipeline that we have now, which I think in a short while has doubled. And I'm like, for some reason, like this entire thing is like really working really well. And again, like when you put a lot of different disciplines together, you put the data brain together with the event brain, I think it just is alchemy at the end of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And we were lucky, and I was lucky to meet you thanks to the acquisition lab of Morka Dybel and Chelsea Wood, which is an amazing program.
Can we please give them a huge shout out? I mean, I went from literally, I want to buy a business to actually being the CEO of a business within 6 months. All thanks to Walker and Chelsea. Like there is no way I keep saying no way in the world and you'll tell me, no, Sindhu, there must be some way. I actually, like now I'll say there is no way in the world I could have done it in 6 months, right? Like, I mean, that's the timeline because the average acquisition is about 18 months long. It's a very painful journey. I have friends actually from Wharton going through the same journey and, not having much.
Tell me about it. I'm 5 months into it now. I haven't found yet. Yeah.
Right. And again, going back to karma, I mean, if you basically spend your lifetime like doing things that are good, it's just going to come back to you multiplied. And I've always believed in that. Like I look at me and like my beginnings, like small town India, to parents who were hugely in debt to where I am right now. I'm like, there is no freaking reason on earth like why I need to be here, but yet I am. And it's like, I strongly believe like it's very hard to do the right thing. But many times I'm like, oh my God, like letting go of my Silicon Valley job that's paying whatever over $500,000. Like, it's just like, it's too much, right? But then again, like you force yourself into that situation and you be like, okay, I trust and there's faith. And then you come out okay on the other end and you're like, guess what? I don't miss that one bit. So.
And now you've joined the greatest industry in the world because it's all about connecting people.
And building joyful workplaces. Like, I don't know how you're going to build joyful workplaces without getting people together. Like mental health hasn't been more important and more relevant than it is today. And like, I know people are cutting budgets and think that, oh, events are like a frills and fancy to have. But the thing is, like, you're not going to be able to have deeply connected people to organizations without events. And how are you going to do that? And it's a matter of time, I think, before people realize that it's actually like super necessary to invest in not only employee engagement, but customer engagement, partner engagement, and even shareholder and investor engagement, right? Like, how do you do investor summits that like really bring investors together? It's a matter of time people kind of realize it. And my company is, I think, going to lead the way there too.
Couldn't agree more with you, Sindhu. Now you're talking about the way you're looking at the business. What was something that you were surprised to discover in this industry?
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good question, Eric. So I'll tell you this. I'm a woman of color, right? And I mean, look at me. There's no question. And I'm 100% owner of my company. I own my company 100%. However, we're running into, I would say, gatekeepers at organizations who are like, hey, do you have the paperwork filed out? And do you have like the WB NEC certification, this, that, and the other? And I'm like, okay, that's like an oddity because the spirit of it is that you actually support women entrepreneurs who are, and right now I'm like in a fix, right? Because I'm 6 weeks in, I'm working literally, my workday ends past midnight every single day. Because I'm still in the first month. I'm not proud of it. It's not the way it's going to be all the time. I know that. I will bring back work-life balance, but that's the way I'm working right now because I need to learn the business. I need to show up for my business and I need to make it do really well. Yeah. I'm having to choose between, do I file this bunch of paperwork for all these certifications? And these people who are clearly capable of supporting me and giving me business won't do because I don't have a certificate. It's almost like the spirit of it versus the checks and the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's. So that's something like, in fact, like I think my team had a pretty sad meeting yesterday where there was actually another woman of color on the other side being like, do you have this certification? Do you have that certification? And I only work with big companies. And I'm like, why all the heartache and the grief rather than saying, you know what, you're such an enterprising company, you're an all-woman company led by a woman, like whatever, you're such an amazing company. How can I help you? I'm finding that
exactly
not the stance. The stance is like, oh, you need to jump through like 10 hoops before we will even talk to you. And I'm like, cut yourself a break. Like, we do great work. We take a lot of pride in what we do. Give us a chance, man. So, yeah.
Absolutely. In this case, women, from what you say, not men. But I had so many instances like that. Not obviously the same reason, but at the end of the day, I always found, and I was working for, McKinsey, J&J, Cafe de Colombia, because you always need to find the right person, not the right company, not the right policy, is the right person. And what the example you're giving me about this person always remind me of what my father used to say. He said, the proportion of stupid people is the same in every organization at every level.
We're trying to remember that. And I keep telling my team, like, it's not a reflection of who you are and the work that you do. It's a reflection of who they are and what their situation in life is. And like one day they're going to get better at it. But at least like what we can do is put our heads down and really focus on doing a fantastic job at what we do.
Absolutely. Sindhu, I cannot not ask you the following question because you're obviously a lot of energy, bright person, and very straightforward. And I'm also very straightforward. So, when it came to the US, one of the things that really struck me the most, and when I would ask direction, should I take a left or a right turn? And the person would say, I'm not sure. So, what do you mean, I'm not sure? I pick a guess. Tell me left or right. I'm not sure. And I was like frustrated. Don't tell me I'm not sure. Just tell me I think it's that way. Anyway, so the point is, it's very difficult to get like a straight answer. Almost like people are afraid to offend you. People are afraid to give you wrong information, whatever it is.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that with your team and with the people you work with? Because sometimes I still have some challenges myself.
No, that's a really good question, Eric. So, I mean, okay, so actually, I'll do one more thing, right? A lot of people say, okay, why should I care about diversity and inclusion? Why should I even care about women? My life is pretty freaking damn good as like, a white man. Like, why the fuck should I care? Like, here's kind of what happens, right? And I was in that, I mean, I wouldn't say I was in the white man situation, but like as an Indian engineer, I had very little appreciation for why do I care if some like, Black person is suffering over there? Why should I care? So, and I found out that I should care because my own internal emotional intelligence grows when I care. I become a better wife, I become a better mom, I become a better person when I care. And it's actually for selfish reasons that I should care because I learn more, right?
Yep.
So I essentially, like the reason why I'm bringing that up is that I essentially invested in going to a diversity and inclusion program, despite being a woman of color, because guess what? I'm racist and sexist as well. Like I have these racist thoughts in my head where I think, oh, if the Black people weren't as lazy, wouldn't they get better opportunities? Or, if the women just worked harder and like stopped, playing second fiddle to their husbands, would they not just be as good as men? Like I've had those thoughts without the backing of why they're in that place for the first time. Slavery was there for hundreds of years that put, Black people in a very, in a not good state. And there's been systematic racism for many, many years, even till today, that actually puts Black people where they are today, which is not great. And similarly, for Indian women who are playing second fiddle to their husbands, the whole community judges them when they speak up, and like I've been spoken up against and like empowered women of color, right? So you kind of like lose the context of what it was the history that happened that put them there. So anyway, so realizing that I'm racist and sexist myself, and because I have racist and sexist thoughts that I'm combating all the time, I've kind of invested in this diversity and inclusion program to undo everything that's been taught to me, right? Like my favorite movie growing up was Ghost. Patrick Swayze was the hero. A scruffy Black man was the villain. It taught me to be afraid of scruffy Black men and said, okay, white men are amazing and all powerful and beautiful, which is completely not true, right? Like anyway, so, and then I came across this tool called shared agreements, which is when you're working as a part of a community, how do you actually all buy in to create a shared agreement? And that's exactly what I did with my team. So your question was, how do you make sure that your team is like, telling you and being upfront and honest with you all the time? So one of the first few things I did in my first few weeks of being a CEO is we all got together and we said, how do we want to show up to each other? It wasn't top down. It wasn't everything. We basically, and this is something that I learned from my diversity and inclusion program. And in that shared agreement was that, some of us are very straightforward people. And my team knows that I'm one of them. So please don't give me hints. Please don't like give me clues. Like, please, like none of that. Like, just tell me, like, if you're like, Sindhu, you suck as a CEO, tell me, because like when I hear that, it's helpful to me and I can do something about it. If you're thinking in your head that I suck as a CEO and I'm not hearing about it, how can I even hope to be better? Right. So like my team knows, and we've created a shared agreements document for like, we've done this like, for many, many things, like, for example, for territory alignment or how we want to show up to meetings, how we want to be respectful of each other's time. And I'm not like I'm not a jackass, right? Like, I mean, obviously I'm a very person. I care for my team a lot. And my job is to support them. And I can't support them to be to the best of my abilities until and unless like we show up for each other and show that commitment and can hold each other accountable to what we've committed to.
Absolutely. I agree 150% with everything you just said, starting with diversity, which has always been part of my life since I joined an international organization called ISEC, and certainly with MPI and what I've done in my life working in 50 countries. I have an issue today with the DEI program. As a Jew, I always ask, why are most of the DEI program in colleges, in companies, in organization, basically excluding the Jews? Which is totally different of the goal of diversity. And if 2.4% of the population in the US doesn't qualify as a minority, I don't know what does. And as a Jew myself, I never identify as a white person because the white supremacists would also want to kill me. But yes, I'm white color, so obviously they don't see the Jew in the first place. But the second place ends up being the same. But I think that what's important is we all come to exactly what you say, the share agreement, understanding why we are together in an organization, to have fun, to work together, to make the organization work, and then not looking at those difference, but more the common point and find the share agreement. So totally agree with that.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Eric. Like, I think, many communities, especially when like a lot of white Mexican people as well, like they don't get, I mean, it's almost like confusing situation, right? Because some of them identify with the white supremacy and are probably racist towards Black people and other people of color. And then some of them are like, no, I don't identify with that. And I feel like there's a lot of like individualistic personality behind like just showing up as a whole person and saying, okay, like, can I accept you for what you bring to the table versus what my intention of how you should be, right? Like as a woman, I'm always like, people are like, why aren't you more docile and demure? Because I'm not. That's my personality, man. Like, this is the way I was.
Yeah, exactly.
What am I going to do?
Point, it took me years to be able to speak about that because I was kind of ashamed or didn't want to create waves. And whether it's the white supremacists on the right or the Islamo-leftist on the left, at the end of the day, they're all dividing people, and that's enough of it. And that's why also I published the book before it's too late for my daughters. But at the end of the day, for me, it's going back to what do we have in common, and that's why you and I are in this country, because we see all the opportunities, and we love that. And that's something that it always starts with the head. So I'm glad for your team that. They now are led by somebody like you.
Yeah, I'll also say this, Eric, like the day I realized that I was a racist and a sexist, it was a very shameful day for me because I'm a woman of color and I'm like, how can I be racist or sexist? But then, like the way the communities around us instill racism and sexism in all of us. And if we don't accept first that we're racist and sexist, we have no opportunity to change it. Like if I don't accept that, like, what am I going to change? I'm not racist and sexist. I have nothing to change, right? So it almost starts with us accepting ourselves, like what our fundamental beliefs are. And you're absolutely right. Like I'm telling my kids right now, educating them heavily on racism and sexism so that they can catch themselves. They're brown women. And then a lot of times they're like, Mama, I wish my skin was lighter. But why? Why would you? Like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Ellen DeGeneres said, I hope we can come back one day to people judging each other by the type of car they're driving.
I mean, I would lose sorely on that point, but whatever.
Sindhu, I love speaking with you and listening to you. Obviously, this is a podcast, so it has to come to an end. Let me ask you one last question.
Yes, sir.
When we meet a year from now, with a bottle of champagne, what are we going to celebrate?
We're going to celebrate my company doubling its revenue and its profits a year from now. And that's my little daughter. You want to say hi?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
What's your name?
This is a podcast.
Oh, Avika.
What's your name?
Avika.
Evika?
Yeah.
You are recording with
starting
your mom.
tomorrow. So
Yeah.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Can I watch TV? You've been talking for an hour.
Yes.
So is he going to accomplish this?
Yes, he's going to publish this. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you gotta be famous.
You're going to be famous. Anyway, so I have two daughters. She's the older one. The summer school starts tomorrow. So this one is spending her time today. The other one went to her baby daycare to be with her baby auntie. So anyway. So that's those my kids.
You make it sound like Sanji's a baby.
She's 6 years old. So I think, she's still my baby.
I can see you're just like me. You're going to have to justify everything you say in the house.
I know,
Evika,
right? I mean,
Evika, I wish you a lot of patience to educate your parents. And Sindhu, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And I look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Yeah, sounds great.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Sindhu, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And I love the end of our conversation with your future boss, one of your daughters. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please go on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, eventbusinessformula.com/group. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.